Machiavelli discovered a truth that still destroys lives today. Men are so simple that he who wants to deceive will always find someone who will allow himself to be deceived. But there is an even more devastating truth he revealed about betrayal. It never really comes as a surprise to those who know what to look for. Betrayal doesn't happen out of nowhere like a bolt from the blue. It's not an isolated, inexplicable event that arises without warning. It's the end result of a meticulous and utterly predictable psychological process that can be detected weeks, months, or even years in advance if you know how to read the signs. The problem is that most people deliberately choose to ignore the warning signs because it's infinitely more comfortable to live in the comforting illusion of security than to face the brutal reality that's systematically unfolding before their eyes. The inconvenient truth is this: the people closest to you, those who know your most intimate weaknesses, your deepest and most paralyzing fears, your most exploitable blind spots, are also the most lethally dangerous when they decide to betray you. They have privileged and unrestricted access to your emotional and material life, know exactly where to strike to cause maximum psychological and financial damage, and know how to mask their true intentions until the mathematically perfect moment to deliver the final, devastating blow. Machiavelli understood that those who can identify the early signs of betrayal have an almost supernatural advantage in the eternal game of power. They can protect themselves completely before the damage is done. Or better yet, they can use this knowledge to control the situation entirely and turn the betrayal back on the traitor himself in spectacular fashion. Today, you will learn the 3 most devastatingly revealing behavioral signs that invariably precede every human betrayal. These aren't obvious signs that any casual observer can spot. They are subtle and extraordinarily sophisticated psychological patterns that only meticulously trained observers can detect and correctly interpret. Once you master these identifications, you'll never be caught off guard by betrayal again. The 3 signs of impending cheating. Sign 1. Exaggerated loyalty. The modern Judas kiss, the detailed manifestation of behavior, the first sign that precedes. Betrayal is paradoxically the exact opposite of what you'd expect: a sudden and dramatically exaggerated increase in public and private displays of loyalty. When someone close to you begins declaring their fidelity more frequently, intensely, and performatively than ever before in the relationship's history, this isn't romantic coincidence or a natural strengthening of bonds. It's calculated psychological compensation for devastating cognitive dissonance. Pay close attention. When someone starts using phrases like, you can always count on me unconditionally. Our friendship is the most important and sacred thing to me. I would never, ever betray you under any circumstances. Or, you're like a brother to me in a repetitive, unsolicited, and contextually awkward way. Genuinely loyal people don't feel the compulsive need to constantly declare loyalty because their fidelity is naturally demonstrated through consistent actions. They simply live it reliably over time without the need for dramatic declarations. The pattern becomes even more revealing and suspicious when these emphatic statements begin to appear at specific, strategically calculated moments, immediately after conversations where you've shared particularly sensitive or financially valuable information, after situations where they could easily have harmed you but consciously chose not to, creating contrast, or when you express any subtle suspicion, intuitive discomfort, or direct questioning about their behavior or motivations. Also, carefully observe body language during these intense emotional statements. Preparing cheaters often display involuntary micro-expressions of discomfort. Avoid direct eye contact during the most intense and dramatic statements, or use overly emphatic and theatrical gestures to compensate for the devastating internal dissonance they are experiencing. They may touch you more frequently during these statements, use an artificially emotional tone of voice, or display signs of stress such as light sweating or nervous movements. A particularly revealing and insidious aspect is when they begin to create artificial and elaborate situations specifically to prove their loyalty in a public and memorable way. They may deliberately create small tests where they choose you over other less important but socially visible options, make minor but public and well-documented sacrifices to demonstrate their dedication, or even turn down minor opportunities that could benefit them if it means betraying you on trivial matters, all while secretly planning the much larger and more devastating betrayal. Be especially wary when these exaggerated displays of loyalty are systematically accompanied by subtle but persistent attempts to socially isolate you from other important people in your life. Seemingly protective phrases like, "No one truly understands you the way I deeply understand you. You can't trust so-and-so like you can trust me. I'll always be here when everyone else inevitably abandons you." Or, "People don't see your true value the way I do," are huge, unmistakable red flags. They're strategically trying to position themselves as your only truly reliable source of emotional support and validation before removing that support at the most psychologically damaging moment possible. The deep and complex psychology behind exaggerated loyalty before betrayal emerges from a devastating and clinically well-documented internal psychological conflict known as severe cognitive dissonance. The person consciously knows they are planning to betray you in a significant and damaging way, but they also maintain a fundamental self-image of being good, moral, ethical, or loyal. To resolve this utterly torturous mental contradiction, they automatically compensate through exaggerated and performative displays of fidelity that serve to soothe their own guilty conscience. It's essentially a sophisticated form of psychological self-persuasion and internal manipulation. Each emphatic declaration of loyalty is a desperate attempt to soothe her guilty conscience and maintain the comfortable illusion that she's not actually a cold, calculating traitor. It's as if she's subconsciously saying to herself, "If I'm constantly declaring loyalty and making gestures of fidelity, then I must be genuinely loyal. So what I'm secretly planning can't really be treason. It must be something else justifiable." Machiavelli penetratingly observed that the most dangerous and devastating traitors are precisely those who can maintain a positive moral self-image while simultaneously planning and executing betrayals. They create elaborate, compelling, and emotionally satisfying internal narratives to justify their actions. "I'm doing this for his long-term good. He forced me into this impossible situation through his own actions. It's better that it comes from me than from someone more cruel." Or, "This will teach him an important lesson about trust." The calculated escalation of loyalty declarations also serves a strategic and manipulative purpose: to systematically disarm your natural intuitive defenses. The more convincingly and emotionally they declare their loyalty, the more you psychologically tend to lower your guard, relax your natural vigilance, and share critical information that could be used devastatingly against you in the future. It's a form of psychological grooming that sets you up to be an easier and more vulnerable victim. There's also a testing the waters element to these exaggerated statements. They're watching your reactions to see how completely you believe in the performance, how much you lower your defenses, and how vulnerable you become in response to their declarations of loyalty. It's a way of gauging how much they can get away with future betrayal. The detailed strategic application. When you identify this specific pattern, don't directly confront or openly accuse them. This will only make them more cautious, sophisticated, and potentially dangerous in their approaches. Instead, use this knowledge to your immediate strategic advantage. Immediately begin sharing less truly sensitive information with this person, especially information that could be used to harm you professionally, financially, or personally. Implement what Machiavelli would call a controlled confirmation test. Share deliberately false, but seemingly valuable or completely unimportant information, and carefully observe whether it leaks, is distorted, or is later used against you through indirect channels. If your suspicions are confirmed through this scientific test, you'll know definitively that it's time to create immediate strategic distance and begin actively protecting yourself. Use exaggerated declarations of loyalty as opportunities to extract valuable information about the person's true motivations and connections. When someone is desperately trying to prove loyalty, they often reveal more than intended about their insecurities, future plans, or associations with third parties that may be relevant to understanding the betrayal being planned. Start discreetly documenting these exaggerated statements, especially if they're made in writing or in front of witnesses. This documentation can be extremely valuable if you need to defend yourself later or expose the person's hypocrisy when the betrayal materializes. Signal 2. Invasive curiosity. Mapping vulnerabilities. The detailed manifestation of behavior. The second sign of impending betrayal is a subtle but systematically progressive increase in curiosity about your personal vulnerabilities. Exploitable weaknesses, psychological pressure points, and areas of your life where you feel most exposed or insecure. This completely transcends casual interest, genuine friend concern, or natural curiosity. It's a strategic and methodical mapping of where to strike with maximum effectiveness when the time comes to betray. Pay close attention when someone close to you starts asking seemingly innocent but suspiciously specific and technically detailed questions about your deepest personal insecurities, current or historical financial difficulties, complex family or romantic relationship issues, sensitive physical or mental health issues, irrational fears or phobias, or any area of your life where you feel particularly vulnerable, exposed, or defensive. The questions may superficially appear to come from genuine concern or friendly interest, but carefully note abnormal persistence, technical specificity, and suspicious timing. Pay special attention when these invasive questions appear in completely unfamiliar contexts, contextually inappropriate moments, or during conversations that should be about completely different topics. If someone asks you in detail about your finances during a casual conversation about movies, about your childhood traumas during a seemingly relaxed social dinner, or about your innermost fears during a discussion about work, this clearly indicates that they have a specific, hidden agenda for obtaining this sensitive information. A particularly revealing and troubling pattern is when they ask questions about situations they already know the answer to, seemingly just to confirm specific details. Scientifically test your honesty and transparency, or see if you'll omit important information. They may ask about situations they already know about through other sources to gauge whether you'll be completely transparent, using your answer as an accurate measure of how much they can trust the privileged information they already have about you. Also, carefully observe how they react emotionally and physically to your vulnerabilities when you voluntarily share them or are pressured to reveal them. Preparing cheaters often demonstrate excessive and abnormal interest in the most painful details. Ask follow-up questions that are not typical of genuine or empathetic concern. Show a subtle but detectable satisfaction when they discover a new, exploitable weakness, or demonstrate signs that they are mentally cataloging information for future use. Notice if they begin systematically testing your reactions to different types of psychological, emotional, or social pressure. They might make seemingly casual comments about your insecurities to observe how you react defensively. Create small but revealing situations that touch on your weak points to map your emotional responses and tolerance limits, or introduce specific stressors to see how you handle pressure in vulnerable areas. A particularly insidious aspect is when they begin comparing their vulnerabilities to those of others, ostensibly to normalize or minimize their problems, but in reality to better understand how their weaknesses compare to other potential targets. They might say things like, "At least you don't have the problem that so-and-so has," while simultaneously collecting comparative data on relative vulnerabilities. The deep and complex psychology behind invasive curiosity about vulnerabilities is a clear and unmistakable manifestation of predatory instincts being systematically activated and directed. When someone consciously decides to cheat, a primitive, ancestral, and evolutionarily programmed part of their brain automatically begins cataloging information that can be used as psychological, emotional, or practical weapons. It's literally like a predator meticulously studying its prey to identify the most effective, efficient, and devastating point of attack. This behavioral shift often initially occurs unconsciously or semi-consciously. The person may not be fully aware that they are gathering information specifically for future betrayal, but their subconscious is already systematically preparing for inevitable conflict. This is precisely why the questions may initially seem genuine and well-intentioned. A significant portion of the motivation is still genuine, but it is being corrupted by emerging predatory impulses. Machiavelli intuitively understood that detailed and intimate knowledge of vulnerabilities is direct and usable power, and those who plan to use power against you will always first seek to systematically map out where you are weakest, most vulnerable, and most susceptible to attack. It's an instinctive and evolutionarily programmed strategy that precedes any conflict. Intimately knowing the psychological terrain before engaging in emotional or practical battle, this heightened curiosity also signals a fundamental and irreversible shift in how they view their relationship with you. Instead of seeing it as a collaborative partnership where their vulnerabilities must be protected and respected, they begin to see it as a potential competition or inevitable conflict, where their vulnerabilities can be exploited for strategic advantage. The most treacherous and psychologically devastating aspect is that they often use your established trust and emotional closeness against you in a calculated way. The closer you are, the more sensitive information and vulnerabilities you naturally share, believing you're safe. They systematically exploit this closeness and trust to gain access to information that an outsider would never obtain, turning the intimacy of the relationship into a weapon against you. The detailed strategic application. When you detect this specific pattern, immediately implement what I call a strict information compartmentalization protocol. Completely stop sharing truly sensitive information with this person and start giving deliberately vague answers, subtle redirections, or changing the subject when they ask invasive questions about your vulnerabilities. Systematically use the controlled misinformation test. Share a fabricated, exaggerated, or deliberately misleading vulnerability and carefully observe whether it is subsequently used against you, shared with third parties, or referenced in contexts that reveal it was cataloged for future use. If your suspicions are confirmed through this scientific test, you have definitively confirmed your suspicions and can take appropriate defensive and escalation measures. Practice what Machiavelli would call protective strategic disinformation. When asked about real important vulnerabilities, provide information that is partially incorrect, outdated, or significantly downplays the vulnerability's true extent. This protects your true weaknesses while potentially confounding any attack strategy they're planning based on incorrect information. Sign 3. Social triangulation. Building the web of betrayal, the detailed manifestation of behavior. The third and most devastatingly dangerous sign of impending betrayal is when someone close to you begins to engage in systematic and calculated social triangulation, sharing your private information with select third parties, creating secret and strategic alliances, gathering social support for their own positions, and methodically building a coordinated network of support for the betrayal they are planning. This is the most dangerous and alarming sign because it clearly indicates that the betrayal will not be an isolated, impulsive act, but a coordinated, sustained, and socially supported campaign. Pay careful attention when someone begins mentioning specific conversations they've had about you with others, especially when those conversations include information you shared in strict confidence. Details about your private life that shouldn't be public knowledge, or interpretations of your actions and motivations that were discussed without your knowledge or consent. Seemingly innocent phrases like, "I was talking to so-and-so about your difficult situation. Everyone's been worried about you lately. Several people have mentioned they've noticed changes in you." Or, "I talked to some friends about what you told me," are clear signs that your private information is being publicly discussed without your knowledge or permission. Pay special and alarmed attention when they begin systematically collecting others' opinions, impressions, and judgments about you, your recent decisions, your behavior, or your character. They may ask seemingly innocent but strategically calculated questions to others about what they think of you, your life choices, your judgment, or your behavior in specific situations. This isn't casual curiosity or genuine concern. It's literally social market research for a future campaign of delegitimization, isolation, or justification of the betrayal being planned. Also note when they begin to form suspicious, convenient, and strategically useful alliances with people you previously had no close relationship with, especially if these people have a historical conflict with you, unresolved resentments, professional or personal competition, or something significant to gain materially from your downfall, failure, or social delegitimization. They are deliberately building a coalition of interests aligned against you, uniting people with different motivations but compatible goals related to your detriment. A particularly revealing and sinister pattern is when they begin to set the social stage by making subtly negative comments, fabricated concerns, or seemingly well-intentioned but fundamentally damaging observations about you to strategically selected third parties. They may express genuine concerns about your emotional stability, judgment, trustworthiness, moral integrity, or fundamental character to specific people, gradually creating a negative social narrative that will justify and contextualize the betrayal when it finally occurs. Pay careful attention to whether they begin to position others against you through biased, selective, and fundamentally dishonest interpretations of your actions, motivations, or behaviors. They may tell stories about you that are technically true in terms of basic facts, but presented in a manipulative way, out of context, or with specific emphasis that makes you appear irrational, selfish, untrustworthy, unstable, or morally questionable. To those who hear only a distorted version of events, a particularly insidious and predatory aspect is when they begin using confidential information you shared to create narratives that question your judgment or stability. For example, if you shared struggles with anxiety, they may begin to suggest to others that you're unstable or that your decisions are compromised by emotional issues. If you shared financial difficulties, they may insinuate that you're irresponsible or desperate. The deep and complex psychology behind social triangulation before betrayal serves multiple, sophisticated psychological and practical strategic purposes. First and most fundamentally, it allows the betrayer to systematically test the social terrain to assess how much support, validation, and protection they will have when the betrayal is publicly revealed. They need to know whether others will side with them or with their partner, and what kind of narrative will be most convincing to the relevant social audience. Second, triangulation provides crucial and necessary external validation for the decision to cheat. When they can convince others that you are problematic, untrustworthy, or harmful in some way, this internally justifies cheating as necessary, inevitable, protective, or morally justified. It's a way of distributing moral responsibility among multiple people, making cheating a collective rather than individual act. Machiavelli deeply understood that truly successful and devastating betrayals are rarely solitary or impulsive endeavors. The most effective, calculated, and destructive betrayers are those who can build social consensus that betrayal is deserved, inevitable, or even heroic. They systematically transform the individual act of betrayal into a social movement of correction, justice, or collective protection. The detailed strategic application. When you detect social triangulation, your response must be swift, strategic, and multifaceted. First, systematically identify all nodes in the social network being constructed against you. Who specifically is being contacted? What precise information is being shared? What specific narratives are being constructed and propagated? What interpretations of events are being promoted? Immediately implement a proactive, preventative counter-narrative strategy. Start having direct, honest, and strategically planned conversations with key people who are being influenced. providing your perspective, context, and version of events before the negative narrative becomes permanently solidified in their minds. Be proactive and in control of the narrative, not merely reactive to distortions. Use what Machiavelli would call calculated strategic division. Systematically identify points of tension, divergent interests, or conflicting motivations within the coalition being formed against you, and exploit these divisions strategically and calculatedly. Not all of the traitor's allies will have identical motivations, and these differences can be exploited to weaken the coalition. The mindset shift you now possess a skill that less than 1% of the world's population has fully developed: the devastatingly precise ability to see betrayal coming before it arrives, like a psychological radar calibrated to detect hostile intentions. But this knowledge comes with a profound responsibility and a fundamental, irreversible shift in how you view human relationships and social dynamics. Most people live in a state of naive and vulnerable trust, romantically believing that emotional closeness automatically guarantees permanent loyalty. They confuse temporary intimacy with lasting security, superficial familiarity with fundamental trustworthiness. When betrayal finally and inevitably happens, they are genuinely shocked and devastated because they never learned to read the warning signs that were clearly present for weeks or months before the event. When you fully master these three fundamental signs: compensatory exaggerated loyalty, invasive curiosity about vulnerabilities, and strategic social triangulation, you develop what I call a calibrated betrayal radar. You don't become paranoid, cynical, or emotionally closed off. You become strategically aware and protective. There's a crucial and important difference between being irrationally suspicious of everyone and scientifically knowing what to watch for, when to worry, and how to respond appropriately. This awareness allows you to consistently operate from a position of psychological strength rather than emotional vulnerability. When you can accurately anticipate betrayal, you can systematically protect yourself, minimize potential damage, or even use the knowledge to your strategic advantage, transforming a situation where you would be a victim into one where you have complete control. Always remember, the ultimate goal is not to completely eliminate the possibility of betrayal. That's impossible in a world of complex and imperfect human beings. The goal is to never be caught off guard, unprepared, or defenseless. By it, when you see betrayal coming clearly, you can consciously choose how to respond rather than just reacting emotionally to the hurt. The mastery of art. Machiavelli wrote that it is better to be feared than loved. But I add, it is even better to be completely impossible to surprise or deceive. When you can see betrayal coming with crystal clarity, you fundamentally transform a situation where you would be a helpless victim into one where you have total control and a strategic advantage. The three signs you learned today: compensatory, exaggerated loyalty, invasive curiosity about vulnerabilities, and calculated social triangulation, are not just practical indicators of impending betrayal. They are privileged windows into the human soul and its most calculating, predatory, and fundamentally dishonest. When you can instinctively recognize these patterns, you understand something fundamental about human nature that most people romantically prefer to ignore. But here's the deeper, more liberating truth. Knowing these signs shouldn't make you paranoid, closed off, or incapable of genuine relationships. It should make you infinitely more selective, strategic, and protective. Authentic relationships don't exhibit these signs because genuinely loyal people don't operate through systematic manipulation and calculated subterfuge. Use this knowledge to build an inner circle of people who never exhibit these behaviors, people who express loyalty through consistent actions, who respect and protect your vulnerabilities, and who publicly defend you rather than secretly conspire. In a world full of potential Judases, the ability to recognize the kiss that precedes betrayal is literally a matter of social and professional survival. Which of these three signs have you observed in someone close to you? Have you ever been cheated on by someone who demonstrated these behaviors before? Share your experience in the comments, And if this content gave you a new perspective on detecting cheating, please like and subscribe. Because in a world where cheating is common, anticipating betrayal is powerful.